Would you gamble on a one-stop strategy? Would you go all in or fold on your championship chances? Welcome to Tinfoil Helmets, your occasional spicy hot take roundup of the latest F1 rumours, all with almost believable conspiracy theories to back them up. Everything here is carefully researched for hours to make sure it is totally founded in logic, reason, and truth. Or not. Who knows? Shall we see if we got anything right this week?
I was surprised at how well we did. Granted, it was 3 weeks out, and I forgot what we even predicted. But there was one prediction I had that I was like, you know what? I want a point for this because I can't even believe what happened.
And we sent this to the committee, and the committee adjudicated that, in fact, we did deserve a whole point for this. So we'll come to that in a moment. Let's work up to the excitement. First, despite all of the information, somebody gets drain-holed again. Surprisingly, nobody got drain-holed.
Maybe.
Oh, maybe.
Because I don't know if you noticed, but they were doing some filming for the F1 movie during this weekend.
I did see some of that.
And one of the things is, spoilers for the movie that's not out till June, but apparently Brad Pitt's character has a crash in Las Vegas.
And he can't race the next day due to medical reasons.
Oh, really? I didn't even know that bit. Spoilers.
They posted that on... There's a Twitter account that is the team, and they post to it like it's real, and I don't understand why. Like, I understand the filming of it, but I don't understand why they need to post to real Twitter.
Viral marketing, Dominic. You just don't understand it.
Well, good job, Expensify AXP team.
Anyway, so we know that there was a crash for this F1 movie. It could have been caused by a drain hole cover. So let's mark this one down as a no, but if we happen to see this movie in June next year and it turns out that's what caused his crash, then we need to come back and I think update our season predictions for 2024.
I think that's very important because accuracy is what we like the most on this show.
Exactly.
We suggested a wet quali.
Well, no, you did. I was smart enough to not think about that in a desert.
However, it had similar conditions to a wet quali because there was a lot of slipping and sliding going on and people not being able to brake because it was so cold. I don't deserve any points for this, but I was there in spirit.
I am still amazed that this Grand Prix is at 10 p.m. at night.
It's baffling to me. It's truly baffling. They should start it at like 6:45.
And if you're wondering, it gets dark in Las Vegas at this time of year around 4:30. And the kind of desert Las Vegas it is gets really cold really quickly.
Lewis was complaining about this on the podium, not to give it away what happened. Ferrari, we said, would be poised to take the World Constructors' Championship off McLaren, and I think they are.
They got some good points off the screen. It wasn't quite as good as like a 1-2, but they moved up. They're now... Crap, I was going to look up the numbers. But they're now, I think, like 24 points off McLaren with 2 races to go.
They are well within grasping distance.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how well they play off of... because I don't think they're expecting themselves to do well in Qatar, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
And last but not least, and the most important one where...
We did skip one.
Oh, we did?
Yes. Max clinches the World Driver Championship. Which
How
I have
did
to
I miss
admit,
that?
When I predicted this, I thought the McLaren was going to do very well on the streets of Las Vegas, and I thought it was going to be a bit of a stretch for Max to clinch the championship. However, turns out that was not the case at all. It was a pretty easy drive for Max to clinch the championship.
It's amazing what happens when your competitor gets caught cheating. Twice.
Something like that.
Yes. So he even got a special car with him and GP to drive in the Rolls Royce to be able to do the podium interviews. So they were planning on this. They knew this was coming. And so they had all the jumpers and the T-shirts ready. But yes, he is a 4-time champion, which means it's his last championship, because that's what happens when you're a Red Bull championship driver. Because we've got lots of data on that, aka only one. So, but speaking of other Red Bull drivers, we had made a prediction, Andrew had made a prediction, that there would be a fun emoji on the sphere judging Lando. Now, in the true spirit of this prediction, there was in fact no judgment on Lando by an emoji. However, another driver thought it would be an exceedingly brilliant idea that when they were filming their dedicated sphere special video, which they did recently, they decided that they would do a thumbs down and look at the car that would be going underneath it. Now, who might that have been? Would it be Colapinto because he's a young, gentle lad and likes to be a bit spicy, or Oscar, or maybe even Lando himself? No. It was Checo, who got knocked out in Q1, and then as he drove past, he thumbed down himself.
It was, I can't even, but like, why would you do that? Why would you film that? And, you know, chapeau to whoever is the Sphere graphics operator who's like, yeah, this will be the appropriate time to do this.
I don't know why you would film it. And I don't know why you would film it if you knew you were crap at your job. Like,
you're under the impression he thinks he's crap at his job.
Well, true. And so what did he misunderstand the assignment that they would be like thumbs downing other drivers? Like what deranged perspective on other drivers would you take that you decide that the appropriate video to do is thumbs downing other drivers? Like, you might have a rival with the other drivers, but come on, be a little bit more mature.
I did really appreciate the one point during the race of Charles admiring his own race driving, his racecraft. Because he's like, oh, Charles, you just watch his own car go by. He's like, oh yes, very good driving, Charles. Like, it was.
So yes, we did pretty well. That was 1, 2, 3, 4 out of 1, 2, 5. Correct.
I counted 3 out of 5. I don't know what other one you gave.
Oh yeah, sorry, no, I can't. I can't read. Anyway, would you like to tell us in the Baseball Hall of Fame where we're going?
Oh, we're in it for sure. We're batting .318, but baseball season has passed, so now we got to think NFL passer rating, and we're sadly doing about a 50.4 passer rating, that's going to get us benched. That's not good. But passer rating's a weird stat anyway. So let's go back to baseball stats. And, we're batting .318. So we're getting just under a third of our predictions right, which, I think is a good number.
So that means that we're not in the Hall of Fame for baseball, for NFL?
No, not at all. Not even close.
Okay. What do we have to aim for in the remaining 2 races to bring us up to the level where we might be in a candidacy for the NFL Hall of Fame?
Knocking off Tom Brady in the Super Bowl despite being an 8-8 team.
I see. So it's less about the stats; it's more about the plays.
Right, because like there's the real question of, is like Eli Manning a Hall of Fame level quarterback? And the answer is kind of like, if you look at his stats, no. But he did beat Tom Brady, who is arguably the greatest quarterback of all time, twice in the Super Bowl. So like, yeah. It's like Fernando Alonso's greatest achievement is beating Michael Schumacher twice.
Yes, I see. So we need to go for predictions that are absolutely out there.
Right, that's the question. Is like, would you put Fernando Alonso in the F1 Hall of Fame if there was such a thing?
Yes.
You would.
I would.
Yeah, but you kind of see the point of like,
yes, I agree.
Since 2012, he's been mid, if best.
Let's see the other drivers that have bettered than him in many different ways. Alain Prost, Ayrton Senna, Michael Schumacher, Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, Vettel. Even to a certain extent, I would also put Jenson Button in there, but
right,
only because he lucked out so much.
He also lost to a rookie in that rookie's first year, which is what the definition of a rookie is.
Yeah. Okay, so we're saying we're not good enough for the NFL yet, and we're going to have to try harder in the remaining 2 races of the season.
Or we just got to we just got to make phone and cupcake predictions, like a race happens.
Okay, there we go. I like that.
Yeah.
Good job. If only we could know that.
Because, Peyton Manning played most of his career against the AFC South, and that's a very easy way to pad your stats when you're going up against the Texans, Jaguars, and Titans.
That sounds like a Greek tragedy.
Fair enough. All right, well, did anything happen between the races?
Well, given that we had 3 weeks, things did indeed happen. Let's bang these out faster than a gear change in a Formula 1 car. Bottas is out at Sauber and will not be in F1 next year. He is going to Mercedes as a reserve driver. Somehow Sauber/Audi decided to pick the McLaren Junior to replace him and not Colapinto, and that just feels weird to me. I don't really understand it. It's very confusing. But in the meantime, while he was, going through his throes of losing his job, he apparently did an Ironman.
He did a lot of, there was a lot of Valtteri social media over the 3 weeks with a lot of what's next sort of thing. And one of the things is what's next was an Ironman, and he did an Ironman like in this, I guess if you're a rich person, villa of some kind that had a pool and a stationary bike and then a treadmill. And yeah, he did a full Ironman on his own in my opinion, the worst ways possible. Like, it was a short pool, so he had to do something like 208 laps. That's a lot of turning. He then did 212 miles, I think, on Zwift, which is a virtual biking platform, which, while I do enjoy a bit of Zwifting, I don't really want to sit on it for 112 miles. And then he ran a marathon on a treadmill. Like, ow.
And he did this cold. Like, he didn't, like, it wasn't like, I've been prepping for it, and, you know, he's a F1 driver, so he's probably reasonably in shape, but still to just drop it, good for him.
Yeah.
And then he went back to cycling afterwards in parts of America, so he's clearly in shape.
Yeah. So my bit of a tinfoil helmet, not even really that tinfoil helmet, thing of why Valtteri is going back to Mercedes is because we know that George can't do setups, and George is relying on Lewis for a good setup, so they're bringing Valtteri in to make sure they have a good setup for the car. While they don't want him to actually drive it, they want him to set it up.
I will also give you the backup of, if they need to, because Kimi is not good enough, they can drop Valtteri in quickly.
Yeah, that's true. Which I guess that would be bad news for Carlos, because we thought there was like maybe something going on there of like they could do a swap with Kimi and Carlos, but yeah.
Maybe it'll be temporary. Also, the question is, are they going to get rid of George? Because it turns out Kimi is the second coming of Jesus Christ. Anyway, they also fired Guan Yu Zhou, which I feel bad for him. He says he's definitely going to be on the grid in at least a reserve capacity next year. But given his absolutely, truly abysmal performance this year, has been outshone by Bottas in almost every race, I kind of understand why he's not anymore.
I would like to apologize for Guan Yu Zhou because we have never featured him in our Does Blank Still Have a Job? And I was honestly thinking about that during the 3-week break of like, oh, we need to really include him in this because he's not good at this. And then, yeah, he doesn't have a job. So he missed his chance to be featured, and we really should have been featuring him. I apologize. The
only reason I'll say that I'm not sure I quite feel bad about it is last year and the year before when the Alfa Romeo / Sauber was not a complete tractor, he actually did reasonably well. Like, I don't think he was that you didn't laugh at him as he drove around the track. It is this year, but by all accounts, that car is truly awful. And so you can't really tell the shit. And so I feel in a positive way, we chose to ignore him because he wasn't completely screwing it up. Maybe it's because we had low expectations for him.
We also pretty much ignored Valtteri as well because that car just seems trash.
And he's so reasonable. He seems such a nice guy. Anyway, so Audi making weird decisions. Speaking of companies beginning with the letter A, Alpine have officially announced that they're going to pick up Mercedes engines, which is not a shock if anybody's expecting it. I also don't think this really makes any difference to anybody because Aston Martin is picking up Honda engines and no longer a Mercedes customer, so nobody really cares the same. It just means the engine company's going to keep going. So, yeah, still weird though.
Yeah, good for Mercedes overall, I guess, because more cars on the grid with their engines.
I assume so. Yeah, I also mean, like, it's no more because of the Aston thing, but I also think economies of scale work. Like, if you're producing, like, 5 customer engines, it's like, or 5 teams worth of engines, it probably works.
Yeah, I think the sad thing here is, like, you know, I guess we have Cadillac possibly coming in as an engine manufacturer. Just spoilers for later in this conversation, but, like, I don't know, it feels weird, like we're slowly trending towards kind of an IndyCar, either Honda or Chevrolet engine sort of situation. Like it's either going to be, oh, do you have Mercedes or do you have a Ferrari engine? Because Ferrari's not going to give up their engine department. Mercedes isn't going to give up their engine department. So, like, yeah, Honda has a complicated relationship. They when they're not in Formula One, they want to be in Formula One, and when they're in Formula One, they don't want to be in Formula One. And
exactly,
which is exactly how you want to run a race team.
Yeah, it's perfect. It's the right way to manage your investment because you're not wasting any money shutting it down and starting it up again. Obviously, because I'm a business expert, I know exactly the right thing to say.
So I'm just wondering if there needs to be something done to kind of make sure there are more, like, cap engine manufacturers to say, in the sense of you can only provide to 2 customer teams.
Yes, I also wonder if there's also a part of, like, more sharing about the engine design so that they can bootstrap a new team, because I think that's part of the problem of going from nothing to something. Like, I think Cadillac, and remember we've got Audi coming in as well, so 2026 we'll have Honda, Mercedes, Ferrari, Ford/Red Bull, Audi, and Cadillac? So that's 7. That's actually pretty good.
I don't think Cadillac's supposed to be an engine manufacturer until 2028.
Well, so it was before we get to the story. Maybe we should just go straight into the story.
That'll be next one.
Cadillac is supposedly definitely going to get into F1 with basically the leftovers of the Andretti team that was not allowed into it, and apparently it's almost a done deal. With the story that they might be coming in with the engine in 2026 is one of the suggestions that might actually be going on right now.
So why was Cadillac good to come into F1 and Andretti not good to come into F1?
I don't know. It's really strange. Toto was quoted as making more comments like, as long as it, brings something to the whole thing, that's great and we should let them in and the teams don't have a vote on it. But what I don't understand is what Cadillac brings that Andretti didn't. Especially when
it was Andretti Cadillac. Cadillac was already involved.
The only reason I can come up with is the belief that the FIA looked at it and actually thought it's not really possible for a new independent team like Andretti to come in and do it without the money. But Andretti's not exactly poor. Like, they run successful motorsports teams, so I don't feel like they don't have the money. It's very strange.
Yeah. And they're still, I think, going to get dragged in front of a congressional subcommittee hearing about something or other because of this. Like, yeah, it's. I mean, I do get the appeal of like, oh, we could bring in Cadillac and that sounds better to the layperson than Andretti. But I think if you are trying to get into, I don't know, if you're getting into motorsports in America, like, I feel like you are going to be equal familiar with Andretti as you are Cadillac. Like,
yeah, exactly. And even the reality of it is just like Alfa Romeo Sauber. It's like they're just going to put a Cadillac sticker on the outside of the car. Like, why does it really make any difference?
Yeah,
there's a difference between who runs the team and who brands the team, and I don't think those have to. I don't think you have to run and brand it. You can run it and brand it. Like, just like Haas is basically the Toyota team, or soon will be the Toyota team. Like, I feel the same thing could have happened with it's very confusing.
I also feel like, at least from an American motorsport standpoint, that like Andretti is almost famous enough to exceed motorsport. Like, people just kind of know what Andretti is and who the Andrettis are. Like, they're arguably not the most successful like IndyCar team. I would say that probably goes to like Roger Penske's outfit. But you say Penske and people think, oh, those yellow moving vans? And it's like, yes, but also really fast cars. But yeah, the vans too, or the trucks too. So, it's, yeah, that, I have a feeling that if you were to randomly sample Americans, that more would know who the Andrettis are than who Roger Penske is.
Why is Penske not racing bright yellow trucks in real semi-truck racing?
I don't know. Because that's not what Roger wants, because Roger's a big fan of IndyCar. Yeah, I mean, he owns IMS.
Yeah, it's very strange.
Isn't that just like briefly somewhat absurd that like the guy who owns the most famous track in a series also like owns a race team that like goes racing on it?
Conveniently, I listened to an interesting podcast with Oliver Noakes, whatever the new Alpine guy. He's about 6 years old. Yeah. And he was talking about he'd worked with Penske to do some stuff. He was trying to do an F1 team, and Penske was not working with him on the F1 team, but like helping guide him as a young lad. And he said that Robert Penske is like a really nice guy, like really nice guy.
Yeah.
And so it feels like if you're going to have a benevolent dictator that owns both the track and the series, he seems like a reasonable person to do it.
Yeah, he definitely did it from the standpoint of he wants it to survive and wants it to keep going. But it is a like kind of a weird, somewhat conflict of interest. But yeah, by all accounts, Roger Penske is a guy who just wants to go motor racing.
I mean, Red Bull own the Red Bull Ring.
Fair enough.
And Ferrari own Mugello, but not that we raced there, except once.
That was fun. I like that race.
Yeah, especially when Bottas just like caused everybody to get rear-ended. Anyway, also Monaco has signed a contract to stay on the calendar till 2030 something. But interestingly, the race moves to June, and as part of the let's not hop back and forth between continents, and I think that's probably a pretty good thing. And they also moved Canada as well, right?
They flopped with Canada, which actually I think is a problem if we think the dates are what they're going to be, because that puts Canada on Sunday of Memorial Day weekend in the U.S., which means that you could watch Monaco in the morning and Indy in the afternoon, and now they're going to be more in direct conflict with each other, which I think is overall disappointing for motorsports fans. Because if you were truly a fan of motorsports on a certain Sunday in May, you can wake up and watch Monaco, then you can watch the Indy 500, and then, you can finish off with what I think the Coca-Cola 600 NASCAR race. Like, you can watch it, motorsport from dawn till dusk, and even then some. Like, which I think is sometimes half the fun of Memorial Day weekend.
And everybody was very excited about the Monaco move because it now meant there was no F1 race conflicting with the Indy 500. So I'm very confused if they decide to undo that.
Yeah. Well, and I think the sad part was it was only, I guess, in conflict if you were like Fernando Alonso trying to do both. But it's interestingly enough how F1 historically still does not race on the same weekend as Le Mans. It would be interesting if they also did that for IndyCar as well, to say, oh, you want to go across and, do a one-off IndyCar race? Go for it. Granted, it's freaking Indy month at IMS for the 500. So I don't even know. honestly, the fact that it's like Canada and Miami makes it somewhat possible, because you could like during the week go drive like at all the testing sessions and rookie sessions that you need to go do to set the car up. And then, pop down for your 3 sessions or 3 days of F1 racing, and then go back to Indy and do more IndyCar. So like, I think it is possible that you could see some crossover, especially for maybe somebody like, the McLaren outfit, where they do have McLaren cars there already. And you could see, Aston Martin with Fernando or something like that. You could see, I think, Fernando or somebody else come in, and, maybe that even just opens up the door for Max as well.
Exactly. I would like to see that be a thing that they try to pull off, like a bit of a, prove that they don't all, like the series don't hate each other. We can have Danny, who can come back to do a reserve drive job and then go into NASCAR in the same weekend.
Yeah, Danny needs to be in the Coca-Cola 600.
Exactly. And then Fernando can go do the IndyCar with Max at the same weekend. And then I don't know who else you'd put in any of the cars, because maybe they don't. Most of them don't want to, and they're probably not very good. We can put Lance Stroll in the NASCAR, because then he'd know how to drive it into a wall straight away.
I was going to say he wouldn't qualify for Indy.
Oh, he would, because his dad would just pay it off.
No, there was actually like qualifying for Indy. Like, cars don't make it into the field.
Nothing can't be solved by money.
Fernando Alonso tried that his last time at Indy and didn't qualify for the race. Or did he qualify, but he qualified like very last. It was not good.
Yeah, it wasn't good. So away from business into the rest of the shenanigans. So in the middle of the break, for no apparently good reason, and nobody's given any details and nobody's leaked anything, F1 fired Niels Vittich, the race director, who'd been doing I don't think actually a bad job, but not a brilliant job over the season. But he was fired for no apparently good reason. It feels like a bit of a Vittich hunt for me.
Well, I'm still waiting on Charles to be punished for the time he drove a lap and a half without his seatbelts done up in Spain.
Was that Vittich?
I think it was. I don't think it was Massey, because I think it was 22.
Okay, we'd fired Massey for his...
yeah.
We won't talk about Abu Dhabi. Also, they fired the head of the compliance team at FIA, which is also very suspicious. Which brings us to an interesting letter that was penned carefully by the one person in the grid that we know who likes to write presentations. The GDPA wrote a long, rambling letter where they used the word "fed up" with the FIA and being treating them like children. And using the word "fed up," I think we know who possibly wrote it, because they were clearly an Eton schoolboy, which is George, because he's the director of the GDPA. And to be fair, I don't think they were wrong to write this, because they are treating the drivers like a bunch of children. It's ridiculous.
I mean, what's old is new again. They've treated them like children for a while. They
have treated them like the hired butler to just drive the car, because obviously it's the car. That's all that really matters. So we'll see about that. That's going to be amusing. But apparently related to the new race director, Rui Marquez, apparently he listened to the drivers and did what they said they wanted to do, which was fix some lines and move some bollards and some other stuff. So that was great. Also, while we were broken and having not the F1 thingamies going around the tracky thingies, we had a new rule that was not really a new rule. Wait, no, I'm confused, because there's 2 rules I wanted to talk about. One, there's a rumour for the rule next year that if you finish in the top 5 at the end of the season, you have to build more parts yourself. I think this is a terrible rule, because I think it basically means that if you build your own parts, you'll get better at it, and everybody else will just buy it, and they'll be like just a homogenous blob. And also, it means that if you luck out and end up getting in the top 5, you will have no idea how to design X random new part. You'll be like, I don't know, which means they'll put you down the back again, so you don't get the opportunity to build the skill.
Yeah, this is essentially the Haas rule, because I think they are one of the largest customers teams on the grid in the sense of what they buy from Ferrari and other things. And yeah, it's I understand kind of what the thought philosophy is, because, if Ferrari has a budget cap that says, I can only spend so much money, and they're already spending the money to design these parts, and then somebody else comes along and says, well, I'm just going to buy the parts and not have to spend the money designing them. I kind of see where they're coming with on this. I think the way out is if you can do some clever accounting to say, these parts don't count towards the cost cap budget. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or you could also spin it around and say, if you're selling parts to teams, you get that money to then also spend on your budget. So if you sell, a package of $7 million to Haas, you get $7 million more dollars to spend on your budget cap. So then you could actually encourage people to design and build their own parts, because that they could sell, because, you want to buy my bits? Great.
I'll buy your bits, Andrew.
Yeah.
Anyway, the other rule that came out is that apparently everybody's planks on the bottom of the cars, which get worn out and caused a certain driver last year to get disqualified, also were being reinforced in a way that was not in the spirit of the technical directive, so they changed it. As of this race, you can't reinforce it in certain ways, and the belief was that certain teams were using this to ride the car really low because it would ride on the reinforced part and not the rest of the plank, and now you can't do that. They said it was 50% of the teams, so 5 of the teams had to actually change, including Ferrari. I wonder if it happened to McLaren, who lost their suspicious rear wing.
Well, that was supposedly its own other thing, because after Baku, they were told, yeah, don't run that rear wing again.
But between the rear wing cheating and maybe their plank cheating, maybe that would explain their abysmal performance this weekend.
I mean, we can also just go look back at some of the last races and see who was sparking the most.
Yes. There was some really suspicious sparks this week, I have to say, on some cars. Anyway, last item in between race drama. Yuki nearly didn't get to race this weekend because he was coming through immigration and got stopped. And if you've ever watched Yuki do an interview, his grasp of the English language is not brilliant. Which I understand because it's not his first language. He is much better than he was, but I can still see that being a problem. Like when you watch him do like Grill the Grid, he like stares at the interviewer being like, I literally don't understand the words that just came out of your mouth. But apparently like he was dressed in like his pajamas or whatever, and he thinks that he got pulled to one side into a very secret room because he looked a bit suspicious because he was like a slob. And I find that very strange. I don't understand why like the F1 person gets pulled over because surely they have like a stack of paperwork 58 feet high and a picture that says this is an F1 driver. But who knows?
I would also just like to say with my own experience with U.S. Customs and Integrations is sometimes I feel like I'm not going to be allowed back in the country just by like having left the country. The questions always feel to me like, it's like, yes, why did you consider ever leaving the United States?
I get those questions. And as somebody who travels on not a U.S. passport, I get very funny questions. And thankfully, when my better half is with me, they back off. I find it very confusing that they're like, I go up first and they're like, oh, you look a bit dodgy. And then my better half comes up and they go, oh, it's okay. He can go through now. I don't understand it.
I still think you look a little bit dodgy.
I know, but not that kind of dodgy. Shall we see if people would be hired for our Formula One team?
Yeah, I want to change up our does Blank still have a job, because we can only bitch about Sergio Perez and Lance Stroll for so long. So I just want to change up the name of this segment briefly to who would you hire for your Formula One team? So instead of being like, why are these people so terrible? It's essentially, would you hire them to do the job?
I would hire Franco Colapinto. I think of all the people on the grid right now, I think he is the most interesting to hire for my team. Despite the fact he's been binning it a lot recently.
He's been binning it a lot to a point of... Did you see... That wasn't something we talked about from Between Race Drama, but Williams had some social media content of the parts they got back from Brazil, and it is just like these cardboard boxes that's like they went through the trash in Sao Paulo and said, oh, is anybody using this cardboard box? No? Cool, we need to borrow this. And just like threw Formula One parts in it. And they're like pulling bits of wings out and everything else. And it's like, oh, do you think we can repair this? Do you think we can replace this? It's like, oh, this one still looks good. And it's like this totally mangled exhaust. It's like, no, there's a little ding right here. We can't use it. It was great comedy, but also like, oh my gosh, the poor Williams team.
Yeah, watching them when Colapinto binned it in qualifying, I think it was. When he binned it in qualifying, the camera immediately cuts to the pit crew who are like, oh no, not again. I mean, like, the Williams crew is used to looking like this, but this felt particularly like, you have to be kidding me. Really?
When you're filling out like a job application, or you're looking through job applications and they're like, oh, we want 5 years of experience in this. How much of experience is 1 year at Williams worth? It's got to be at least 3 or 4, right? Like if you're a Williams mechanic, how many years is this?
Well, if you assume that in the average year, you probably have to rebuild the car twice, right? Really, from, scrapped parts. And I think they've had to rebuild it 10 times this year. So it's 5. It's 5 times. That's how many 5 years of experience it is. But I would still pick Franco Colapinto for my team. I think he is worth the flyer to see what it would be like.
I think it depends who my team is. But yeah.
True. But if you're Ferrari or Mercedes or Red Bull,
if I'm Ferrari,
I think I still would.
To a point that I'll try to make later in rumors. In Ferrari, I might. Mercedes, I might. Red Bull, I probably wouldn't.
And who is he rumored to be going to?
Probably Red Bull. Well, that's if what Perez is also seeking. I think I saw like a $20 million buyout of his contract.
I love the fact that we, in the past month and a half, have gone from he's going to get fired, actually I'm staying till 2026, to the leak of how much money he wants. This is negotiation, right? Clearly the negotiation has been, and Perez is just reminding everybody that he's got the contract, and now they've all accepted that he's got the contract. He's like, but if you want to break it, you can give me this much money.
Actually, I want to take Sergio Perez off the why does blank still have a job list, or would I hire this person list, because I think Sergio is now like playing a whole different level of game of, I almost think he's driving terribly on purpose because I don't think he wants to be in Red Bull anymore. And it's one of these, like, if I'm terrible enough, they'll just pay me to go away because they can't afford to keep doing this. So yeah, I'm going to be terrible. And like, you've signed a contract with me, honor the contract or buy it out. And I'll give you the number to buy it out. You're telling me for $20 million we can make Sergio go away? Write the check, Kurt Helmut. Write the check.
Oh, please make it happen. Yeah, do it now, please. Get rid of him. I'm not entirely sure who I would pick as my second driver. You know, I'm going to pick Oscar as my second driver.
Oh, that's a great choice.
Oscar and Colapinto.
Yeah. And
in my perfect car, which will be powered by a Mercedes engine and designed by Adrian Newey.
Sounds almost like the next Aston Martin.
Exactly.
And then
they could get rid of the two washed-up drivers.
Lance Stroll was also terrible. Apparently, he didn't have a radio this race, and that's why like his pit stop took forever because they didn't realize he was coming in.
Suspicious.
I know.
There was not very many radio quotes this weekend either. The TV race director was terrible. Who would be in your team then? If you're going to pick two people, who would you hire for your F1 team, Andrew?
Do I have to pick like crappy drivers, or do I have to pick I pick good drivers?
You pick the drivers who you think would make the right. Because you need a balance in a team, right? This isn't just like, I'm going to pick Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton because they're like, the GOATs. You have a team. You're trying to make it work. You're trying to make it go in the long term. Who would you pick?
Well, I think it depends what kind of team we're going for. If I could have Max and Oscar, I'd pick Max and Oscar. If we're going for like just vibes, because I had this conversation last night during the race, I'm going Alex and Liam. I think they'd be the vibiest team.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Like, as in people who would get along and be like, peace and love.
Or just like, remember the days of like 2017 where Ricardo was still like a little bit better than Max, and like he and Max were just like fun to have like all their content and stuff from, and like, like there's the video of them from like the top of a Rouge, and yeah. So I'm thinking like just the vibes and like all around good times. I think Liam and Alex would be a fun bit.
Interesting. I don't disagree. I'm not entirely sure that Alex and Liam would get along, but they must know each other from the Red Bull days. So.
Yeah. The anti-vibes team would be George and Lando.
If you're going to try put two people together who might punch each other in the face, I think I'm not sure Lando and George. I think George. Oh no, wait, George. I was going to say George and Fernando, but George and Fernando are like BFFs.
Yeah, they get along too well. Because you
can't
put George with like. You have to put George with somebody like his age because he does have respect for the older drivers. Like because to be honest, he would love to be paired up with Fernando because he's kind of wiped the floor a little bit with Lewis, and then he can wipe the floor with Fernando, and then he can be like, "Look, I'm the greatest of all time, even though I've done nothing." This is like his first win that like really doesn't have an asterisk with it.
Should we go into the qualifying recap?
Sure, why
not? It was very boring. It was kind of late. On a long track that is like so well lit, it just looks boring, and I just didn't really like it. I get very confused between Singapore and Saudi Arabia, and
this is Vegas, so a whole nother track altogether.
Exactly. It just gets very confused. Like all three of these tracks, I'm like, whatever. Anyway, qualifying happened. Some weird things happened, but not really weird. But Pierre somehow slapped it onto P3 on pure pace alone.
I think the cameras needed to be about 10 feet higher.
Yes. And the director, the TV director, needed to be better because he kept missing things that were happening.
Sure.
Maybe that's why I felt it was so boring, is he did terrible like shots of picking which cars he wants. George stuffed it on pole, and it galls me to say that with a great lap.
Yeah, and Lewis would have been P3 if he had his Q2 time.
Yeah, I think Lewis was on, other than he whiffed it, which I think is a whole other conversation. He would have been. I think he would have got pole. I think he would have got pole. He was really in the mood, but he whiffed it, so whatever. But he didn't whiff it as bad as Perez.
I heard a rumor his tires came out too cold again.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is this a substantiated rumor, as in Lewis said it, or is this just the internet making shit up?
Probably the latter.
Okay.
I didn't hear it from Lewis, but I was briefly scrolling through some social media this morning to try to make sure I had some good notes to contribute to our podcast, and I believe I saw that.
Okay. Yes, so qualifying. Anything else you want to qualifying?
No, because I honestly didn't watch it because it was Friday night at 10 p.m. and I've had a pretty crazy week, so I was like, I just want to sleep.
Yeah, I can support that. Race recap?
I was peer pressured to watch this race live, and I'm kind of disappointed I did because it was not good.
No, I would like to phrase that I don't think it was a bad race. There were races we've watched this year where we were like, oh my god, I would like those 2 hours of my life back.
It's not France in 2020 or 2021, whichever that one was, that has no overtakes and no interesting things happen. That was by far the worst race I've ever watched.
And there was some excitement because nobody knew how to make the tires work, but yeah. I will say that the most exciting things happened, or interesting things happened, were entirely after the race in the podium situation. But should we talk about some race things before I pontificate for 45 minutes about driving around a Rolls Royce?
Sure, let's talk about the race. Lando's bad at starts.
Is Lando good at anything?
Talking into a microphone.
He seemed to put his foot in it with that, so I'm not going to subscribe to that. But yeah, he's good at his start again.
Streaming on Twitch then?
Yeah, he's good at that. Everybody was confused about their tires. Like, people were pitting in like the first 5 laps, and then people were slapping on the hards, and then after another 10 laps were going and changing the tires, and then everybody stopped going into the pits for like the second half of the race, and it was very confusing.
It was very odd for all that they talked about during the pre-race coverage. It's like, oh, it's a one stop, could be a 2, but it's a one stop. Everybody think it's going to be a one stop, and then it was like very quickly, this could have been a 3 stop. Like, with how people were reacting to everybody around them, it's like, do we even know what's going on?
Yeah, it was very strange. And some drivers even did 3 stops, but only 2 of those times did they get tires because their crew forgot that they needed to be out there, aka Esteban Ocon. That's terrible. So I think, in all honesty, I think because the tires were confusing is what made this race not terribly boring.
But I think because of how terribly boring the track is, it's what makes the tires bad, because like there is no time, there is nothing for them to like warm up on. Like the straight is long, a very long straight. The corners are not the most aggressive, so there's nothing to keep the heat in it when like there's probably like 2 or 3 corners where you can really generate good temperature into your tires, and then like it's just unsustainable because then there's just another long straight into like a slow 90 or something. It's kind of a bad track.
Yeah, I still think it's very weird, but what else are you going to do in Las Vegas in a place that has just straight roads?
So there is a roller coaster in Las Vegas, so anything is possible, like in one of the casinos.
True.
I think if we truly want to reinvent Formula One in Las Vegas, we need to get we don't need Herman Tilke to design a track. We need Hot Wheels to design the track.
Yes, I wholly support this. This makes sense. But here's the rivalry we need. We have got Saudi Arabia, who is building an elevated hairpin 150 feet up in the sky for like 2029 or whatever it is.
Is that how Stroll exits Formula One?
Yes, off the outside into the sand. It's going to be it. It's going to be beautiful. But now, because that's what Saudi Arabia is doing, clearly Las Vegas needs to one-up this, and they need to come up with an actual loop. And the physics say this can happen. They can, especially with like all the active aero in 2026 on afterwards, they should have a special, there's the X mode and the Y mode and the Z mode. They should have the L mode, not for loser, but for Las Vegas. And it should be an extra special one, like wings pop out the side and it sticks it to a loop-to-loop. Then that's what they should do.
And I think even on top of that, you could, for some safety, you'd have to have a bypass for like safety car and VSC. How terrible would it be if you had a VSC when you right at the top of the loop and you had to start slowing down? It'd be terrible.
Well, this is why it requires extra work. They have to carve out special regulations. Just put it in the race director's note. Please ignore the VSC between lift off ramp 1 and ramp 2. Ignore all safety signals.
Yeah.
Speaking of weird roads, entries, ramps, turns, and other things, Carlos Sainz went to pit but I don't understand whether he was told to or told not to, but he definitely, without question, no hesitation, crossed the white line and didn't go into the pits after having previously committed to it. And yet he did not get a penalty.
Well, Lewis didn't get a penalty in Hockenheim in 20-something or other.
Well, that was a different race director, and that was in the past before they became an authoritarian regime vis-a-vis enforcing the rules. And I think this is because of Iberian Peninsula bias, because the new race director, Rui Marquez, is from Portugal, which is on the same bit of land as Spain. Maybe not bit of land, but same, land mass. And the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so this is to combat British bias.
Okay, well, while we're still talking about the race, I think there are two things we need to cover. And one is, where was McLaren?
Did they turn up? I can't remember. I don't remember seeing them.
So I think it's easy to make the excuse of, well, they were cheating before, or cheating is not necessarily the right word. They were using creative interpretations of the rules that the FIA said, no, that's not a good interpretation of the rules. But man, they had no pace this week. Like, it was one of those, I honestly thought Max was going to clinch the championship in the Qatari sprint, because it's a street track. It's McLaren has been good on street tracks. The Red Bull's kind of been not great in these situations. They didn't even have a good wing to bring to this race. We haven't even talked about that yet. Helmut Marko was quoted on either Thursday or Friday of saying, oh yeah, we brought the wrong wing. And I don't think wrong is the right term, because I think if I understand things correctly, like, they just never made like a low profile wing this year for Monza or essentially Vegas. They just didn't, with how many times Sergio binned it, they just, I guess, didn't have the resources, didn't feel it was necessary to, of all the things that were especially going wrong with the car at that point in time, we don't need to waste resources building a slim wing. We'll just ride off the weekend and do something else. So they showed up to Vegas with a wing they did not know was going to work, or they didn't think was going to work well, didn't work well. They ended up taking a Dremel to it, which is, that is quite an amazing video that I saw of. It's like, of just all right, here, there's just a mechanic in the back of the garage and there's some lines drawn on the wing that's like, here's where you Dremel. And that is fascinating to me, that like, you think of how many times this car has been in a wind tunnel, all the CFD analysis that has been done on it to make sure it's like perfectly aero balanced and everything else, going 300 kilometers an hour down the Las Vegas Straight. And no, there's just some chap in the back of the garage with a Dremel tool going over some lines they drew on the wing. And it's like, well, I hope this stays balanced.
As part of the 2022 regulations, teams were required to submit before the race the modifications and special parts that they brought to the race. Is Red Bull in breach of the regulations because they did not present to the FIA and the press the opportunity to see these pictures before the race? Because, like, they didn't file the paperwork.
I mean, I guess this is like the Theseus's rear wing, in a sense. Mm-hmm. Of like, well, they brought the same rear wing they had. It wasn't a new bit. And then they just decided to like cut bits off of it still being within the rules.
If I was McLaren, I would be filing my lawyers straight to complaining about this right now. But yes, it was very weird where they were, the McLarens. It was very weird in actual fact where the Mercedes end up being, who were just great all weekend for no apparently good reason. And
they still don't understand that car.
They don't understand that car. The Ferrari seemed to be understand where they thought the car would be, and it wasn't that far from it. Red Bull were just on a wing and a prayer. And maybe the reality is Max is just the GOATest of all time, because Perez was 17th.
Hey, Red Bull does give you wings.
It does give you wings, especially with nice curves and filters the air and everything. Is there anything else we want to talk about of the actual racing?
Oh, there's the Ferrari drama. Do we want to talk about the Ferrari drama?
Oh, yes, because I think you need to really catch me up on this, because I remember there being drama, and I think I sent you a link late last night about such a string of expletives exploding from Charles Leclerc's mouth on the radio on the cooldown lap. It was ridiculous. He was Pisseed. Wait, pisseed? Take one out of that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. He was furious.
Yes.
I'm smiling, but I am furious.
Yep.
That's a good movie. If you haven't seen that movie, have you seen Death of Stalin?
No.
Oh, it's an amazing movie. I strongly recommend you go watch Death of Stalin.
Okay.
Yeah. So apparently, there was a string of Charles's statement after the race where he may or may not have left the radio on and didn't mean to leave the radio on and broadcast all of this. Because that was the other thing I heard, is he accidentally left the radio on, which, good job, Charles, talking to yourself through everything. But Charles it's worth going to find if Dom doesn't put it in the show notes or something like that. But Charles just, he was very unhappy at the end of the race last night. And it came around by the kind of big pull quote, if you want to have a pull quote from it, is that every time he is a nice guy, he likes being a nice guy, but every time he's nice, he gets screwed over, more or less.
The thing that I don't quite understand is if he said all of this when he didn't mean to have the radio on, he's talking to himself a lot in a very critical way. And I'm slightly worried for Charles, if that's how he feels about himself.
Yes, but we've known this is true of Charles for a very long time, because let's not remember when he crashed into a wall in Baku and he was, I am so stupid. So this checks with everything we know of Charles. And this is also why Charles has a golden retriever, because this is exactly what Charles needs in his life.
An emotional support puppy.
Right. But apparently, I don't know what the conversation was prior to the race. We don't know what that was. But apparently there was a Ferrari conversation prior to the race involving, where they're going to be, where they need to be to try to maximize points, to take off McLaren, to win the Constructors' title, because that is still very much up for grabs. They are 28 some odd points behind or like that, which could still be very interesting down to the last couple races. So then there was the whole thing during the race. Carlos was like, I want to pit. We need, essentially, hey, are we one stopping or are we two stopping? Because if we're one stopping, I'm going to burn out these tires. But if we're two stopping, I need to burn out these tires. But if we're one stopping, let me know. And I don't think they did the best job of letting him know.
They did get back to him when they said they would get back to him, which in the context of Ferrari is a major shift.
Fair enough, but it's still the case, but I don't think they got back to him. I think they got back to him with a one stop, not a two stop.
Correct.
Yeah, so I would say they really didn't get back. They really didn't tell him what he wanted to know, because the whole thing is like, if he's going to not leave anything on the table with these tires, because the last thing you want to do is pit with grip left in your tires, life left in your tires.
Right.
Like, don't tell him you're going for a one stop and then call him in. But then he was trying to say like, hey guys, we need a box. Hey, we need a box. And there was a AWS prediction thing, like that if they had pitted when he wanted to pit 2 laps earlier, he would have been P2 in the race instead of P3. Now, there's all of that. And then there's the other thing of after the second round of pit stops, Carlos was behind Charles. And Charles was told that Carlos will not attempt to overtake you. And then Carlos overtook him.
Supposedly, just before the recording, I read that somebody went back and reviewed his radio. And it was that Carlos was told just not be too aggressive about it, not that he shouldn't overtake.
Yeah, but that's 2 different instructions to 2 different drivers.
Yes.
And Charles had the great quote of maybe try Spanish next time.
That was spicy.
Great quote.
Did you see the post-race Carlos interview where he was doing the media pen? And the Italian media was like, please tell us what's going on. And Carlos was like, no, I'm not. I know I will get this wrong if I speak it now. We will speak privately and discuss it. And I mean, to a certain extent, credit for Carlos to like not unleash hell, but also at the same time, what is going on?
Well, there was also the quote there of, Charles is mad at me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's stuff going on at Ferrari.
Is this a Carlos problem? Or is this a Charles problem?
Oh, I 100% believe this is a Charles problem.
Oh, that's not boding well for Lewis next year.
Well, that depends on if Lewis is washed or not.
Yes, exactly. I was about to say, if Lewis is washed, then maybe this isn't such a huge problem. But if it's competitive, maybe it's a problem. Or maybe it's not a problem if Lewis is competitive because he'll make Charles look stupid.
However, I'm wondering if this is a Lewis throws a hat at Nico Rosberg moment for Charles Leclerc. Because, I think we've always wondered like why Max and Charles race each other with so much more respect than Max versus literally anybody else on the grid. And I think to some extent, Max knows that Charles is a nice guy, and being a nice guy on the Formula One grid sometimes means you're a little bit of a pushover.
And so you're saying Max races Charles in such a way because he feels sorry for him?
No, I'm saying that Max knows that Charles won't push him off the track or anything like that. That Charles...
I see.
That, like, especially since 2022, in like the 23 and 24 seasons, Charles has been nowhere near Max. Charles is a very smart driver. I think he's a very good driver, very smart driver, and he knows who he's racing against, and he's not currently racing against Max. And Max knows that Charles is a smart driver and a nice guy. And, if he knows he's not racing each other, he's just going to let Max go through, with a little bit of a fight, but not like an extreme fight.
I'm not sure I'm going to subscribe to that because 2022, they were racing for the championship.
Totally. 100%. I said 23 and 24.
True, but they drove each other with respect in 2022.
But I wonder if but Charles, for a lot of the time, we've heard a lot of radios where Charles has been the obedient golden retriever, so to speak. And I'm hoping that time of Charles is done because we could get a very different Charles Leclerc and it could be very good.
Yeah, my hope for Lewis and the Ferrari team is that maybe he'll beat some sense into them because I don't think Lewis is willing to take a bunch of crap. It's so weird what's going on with Ferrari. And I know that Sainz, maybe it's because Sainz is bitter, but he seems to be being a bit of a pain in the butt in the grand scheme of things. Like he's trying to prove something, and I don't really get what Sainz is trying to prove.
He's trying to prove that when his Williams contract is up, if Williams is not near the front of the grid, that he is still worthy of a front of the grid drive.
Yeah, but there's something that feels like that's like you're optimizing too early. But I don't know.
Well, they only have so long of a career.
True.
But either way, I think this is going to be interesting to see, like, is this just a one-off Charles, saying self-deprecating things to himself, or is Charles actually going to change? Are we going to see a substantial shift in Charles Leclerc? And for some part, I think, Lewis Hamilton going into Ferrari could be great if the team is willing to change their culture. Because I don't think Ferrari currently does have a winning culture. Mm-hmm. And, I think, Lewis might be able to bring some of that self-accountability to the team. And if Ferrari is able to embrace that with how the pace they've had in this formula and maybe going forward, like, I could see them winning it next year.
I would love that. But it needs to be Lewis to win it so he can nope out.
Sure. But, because McLaren doesn't look great right now. Mercedes doesn't know what's going on with their car. Red Bull could be a midfield car next year with how things are going for them. It could just be Ferrari ready to pick up the pieces because they seem to understand their car. They seem to know when they're fast. That's a great spot to be in development-wise going into the next season. If you understand what's going on and you understand how your car works, you're doing better than probably the 9 other teams on the grid, with the exception of maybe Alpine also, I think, has a decent understanding of things.
Yeah, and I just don't understand why they can't fix their car. They know when it's going to be crap and they know when it's going to be good, but they don't seem to be able to fix it. So. The question here, though, is does this mean Lewis is going to have pulled a massive blinder again?
If he does, great job, Lewis.
Anything else for the race before I talk about the podium situation?
There was a really weird thing that felt like a real nothing burger at the start of the Sky broadcast, or one of the segments they had on the Sky broadcast, that was Martin Brundle saying if Max is one of the greatest drivers of all time. What do
you mean if? He clearly is.
The thing was ranked as where does Max rank on the pantheon of the greatest drivers in F1? And it's and pretty much the answer was, well, he ranks exactly where you, the viewer, think he should rank. It was...
What? Okay, just to save you time, Sky, when you're listening to this, because you're just trying to pick up some content, I'm not entirely sure of the order, but the GOATs in F1 are Ayrton Senna, Alain Prost, Lewis Hamilton, Michael Schumacher, and Max Verstappen. They all have the magic that is the goatedness. They've all gone through a bit of adversity. They've all done a bunch of weird stuff, and they've all shown that they have moments of absolute brilliantness.
I'm upset Niki Lauda wasn't on your list.
Yeah, having rewatched it recently, he was a great driver, but he was kind of peaky and trophy. He gives, this is going to sound, he gives me Fernando Alonso, but better vibes in terms of his driving.
Sure, but Schumi had some peaks and troughs.
Yeah, but he just, 7 years of 7 titles, blah, blah, blah. He's got to be in there.
Fangio?
How many does Lauda have?
3.
I don't think you can compare anybody from 1975 onwards to anybody from 1975 and before. I think it's just too different.
Fair enough. Jackie Stewart?
Before 1975.
Sure.
You can have the old school GOATs and the new school GOATs. And I think that's a fair. I think Fangio and what's his name? Not Jackie Stewart. Who's the other one? Sterling Moss.
Yeah.
And people like that. So
I think you do have to include Lauda in any sort of conversations, because Lauda is just very interesting in the sense of what would his career have looked like if he didn't have that crash at the Nürburgring.
Yeah. He's closer to Michael in his approach to the sport.
Yeah. But then on top of that, let's not forget, Lauda retired, then came back with McLaren and beat Alain Prost by half a point in equal McLarens in a year where he was terrible at qualifying because he was scared of those damn engines in qualifying.
Again, I will repeat my point that you can compare him closer to Fernando Alonso than I think maybe you would do otherwise. Because Fernando Alonso came back and thought he could be great, but he picked the wrong team.
Fair enough. All I'm saying is, like, Rush wasn't about Fernando Alonso.
No, it wasn't. And nor will F1 the movie be about Fernando Alonso.
However, I think you could make Rush 2 about Michael Schumacher.
Oh, yeah. Michael Schumacher versus Fernando Alonso.
Or Ayrton Senna. Because no, you do it with Ayrton Senna, because then you can tie in, like, Lauda's last seasons with Senna's first seasons. So that's Rush 2, and then Rush 3 would be Schumacher.
Got it.
I'll call Ron Howard right now. We'll get this done.
Good job.
Yeah.
Well, there'll be plenty of money sloshing around after the next F1 film is just such a massive hit.
Yeah. I mean, it's Jerry Bruckheimer produced.
It is.
Oh, hey, that's some F1 movie drama that we can talk about in this podcast. It's just getting really off the rails, which tells you exactly how good the race was, that we've talked about everything but the race. Jerry Bruckheimer is very upset at Lewis Hamilton. Well, very upset in air quotes, because he keeps costing them more money for the Formula One film.
I had not heard this.
Because Lewis is a technical advisor on the Formula One film, and he keeps telling them, like, this isn't right, or you need to redo this. And so they're having to, like, reshoot things or redo things. And I think even on the grid walk, he talked about it. It's like, yeah, it's costing us more money. And it's like, but we're doing it because we want it to be good and authentic. But it's funny that Lewis Hamilton is costing this F1 movie more and more money because they're having to reshoot things and redo things to make it more authentic. Which, good job, Lewis Hamilton.
I do wonder whether he might go too far. Because remember, a movie is not about accuracy. It's
True.
about the emotion.
True. Niki Lauda said about Rush that they got about 80% right, which is pretty good for a Hollywood movie.
Did you see the commentary from all the fans who took the picture of the crash that happened on the start-finish straight? And people were, like, basically dragging Brad Pitt for the second race in a row for not being able to act. Because he does this weird collapse thing this week in Las Vegas and just looks really weird. And there's the one where he was running around at Mexico and apparently just was doing it all kinds of wrong. I'm very curious to see how this is going to get edited.
This is one of those where, like, one of the reasons why I love movies is because, like, if you look at, like, what the camera sees, it's like, oh, this is brilliant. But then if you, like, zoom out just a little bit, you're like, oh my gosh, this looks terrible. And I have no doubt that, like, yeah, watching this happen, it probably looked terrible. But I guarantee in the edit, it's going to look fantastic.
I'm going to say something that's going to make me sound like a total weirdo. But I have the Apple Vision Pro, and they've been doing some video content on it. And it is really, it is simultaneously really impressive content because you feel like you're there, but it's also truly awful content because you feel like you're there. Like, imagine going to a stage in a play and standing in the middle of the stage while it happens around you. And you can see the fact that the rock that they've got in the corner is made out of styrofoam sprayed with glittery silver paint. And you see the seat, and actually it's not really a seat, and you see the makeup on people's faces. Like, the whole thing is like that. You're watching like, wow, this is amazing. I feel, and you're like, I don't really want to be here. I want that feeling of a film. There's that slightly stepped away from it feeling, and I think that's what people are seeing when they see this weird crappy acting supposedly from Brad Pitt. Is it's like then they're seeing it, to your point, the hand gesture you made of, like, the actual bit that you see and the way it gets color corrected, the way the audio plays into it. I just think I agree with that. Otherwise it's going to be a truly awful film.
I mean, you look at any of, like, the Marvel Cinematic Universe behind the scenes stuff of where they're doing superhero stuff, and it all looks so, like, kitschy and gimmicky and stupid. And then you see in the movie, and yeah, sometimes it's that, but sometimes it's also really cool where it's like, oh, that was neat. Like, yeah.
That's why it's an art form. Speaking of nothing to do with racing, I'm going to spend 2 minutes talking about the glorious podium, because yet again, they wasted a full 10 minutes of my life by stuffing the drivers in a Rolls Royce and driving it to the Bellagio to do an interview and then driving them back again. I gave up for the driving back. But one, they clearly were ready for Max to win it because they had his big sign ready. And they put him in a special car. He got his own special car with a GP. And they put Carlos, George, and Lewis in the same car. And Lewis walks up to the Mercedes and he's like, you can see his body language. It's like, do I really have to get in this car? I think he was like, it's too much effort. And B, I think he thought the car was kind of like showy and gauche. It was ridiculous. he gets in the car and he sits down, and George and Sainz are yabbering away, and Lewis just leans forward and winds down the window, and like somebody who has never been to a city, in like an international city in his life, is staring out the window like a lost puppy looking at the world go by. It was great because Lewis was like, I just don't care. And then he pulls down the vanity that's in the back seat, and he checks his eyes and like, you know, makes sure he looks good, and then gets on with it. And it was great. And I'm just like, Lewis is such a pro. Like, he is great.
You know what really bothers me about them doing like the interviews at the Bellagio? Because I believe the race does go past the Bellagio.
Yes.
Yeah. Why would you not make sure the iconic Bellagio fountains are not covered up by like grandstands or something like this? Have them park up in front of the fountains, and then you get like this great finishing shot of like the 3 podium cars parked in front of the Bellagio fountains with the fountains going off. How is that not the picture you're doing?
I assume it's an engineering concern, because then you've got to get the cars back from the Bellagio to the pit lane, and you need to have the pit crew there to cool it. And I assume it's got something to do with it. But maybe they should have thought about that before they permanently built the pit lane.
Well, put the pit crews in the Rolls Royce, get them out there with all their equipment and stuff. Like, you can make it happen. Like, with everything else we've done for the Las Vegas Grand Prix, you could make this happen.
You get the safety car and the medical car, and you put a trailer on the back of it, and you just race like the cars once they've all gone past. Then you just get in it and drive down there as quick as possible, and you'll beat everything. Just get everybody on the lap.
Well, like 3 Land Rovers or something. Just like have all the cool, like every team has a Land Rover. Just put all your cooling equipment in the back, and then, you know, if you're on the podium, ready to go.
It's ready to go. Yes, the podium was great. Terry Crews did the interviews. He fangirled over Lewis. It was great. It's kind of adorable, actually. Jenson Button helped him.
To be fair, every time you see Terry Crews talk to anybody, he's always like fangirling about them. Terry Crews loves his life, and I love him for that.
Yes, but he really fangirled over Lewis. Like, the 2 other interviews between Sainz, Max, and George were like, I'm going to ask you about Las Vegas. Blah, 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 Las Vegas. Where are you going to party tonight? Blah, 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 blah. Isn't it great driving around Las Vegas? Blah, 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 blah. And Lewis, he was like, man, you're a legend. I love you. You're amazing. Did you, like, the way he phrased the questions was just like he clearly paid attention to it.
To be fair to Terry Crews, George Russell and Carlos Sainz are not legends compared to Lewis Hamilton.
For sure. Anyway, to wrap up the race, the TLDR is, in some ways, it was kind of a good race because there was lots of overtakes. Good job, Lewis. Racing was kind of good. There was
good job, Checo, going around 2 people, including Liam Lawson, and nobody hit a damn wall.
Yes.
That was cool.
Yeah, it was great, and it was kind of unpredictable. All good, but at the same time, I just felt empty afterwards.
Yeah, I feel like there was a tale of 2 races. Like, the first 25 laps is where all the action was, and then everybody was kind of spaced where they were going to space, and it's like, oh, cool. So I got to sit here for 45 minutes and watch nobody hit a wall. How did nobody hit a wall with all the talk of lack of grip, lack of traction, people trying to go 3 wide down the strip into that last corner, and nobody hit a wall? Come on, guys, hit a wall.
The Williams team, who were the prime candidates for hitting a wall, probably got a very stern message from James Vowers. Please, don't hit a wall. They did retire Albon, whose car went pop because he got stuck in a plastic bag, or a plastic bag got stuck in it. Either way, sucked for him.
All right, so Dominic, who is your driver of the day?
My driver of the day, because it was Max, because he was so calm and reasonable.
He was oddly calm and reasonable, but I think that's like, this is probably, because of what happened in Brazil, this is probably the first time he hasn't really been on the back foot for the championship since Imola. And, you know, this is one where it's like, okay, you know exactly what you need to do to, like, not even, like, he could have let Lando win, like, the race, and it still would have been, like, or he could have let Lando past him and still like, okay, we'll just wrap this up in Qatar. Because it was getting to a point where, like, Max just needs a point. Like, Lando needs all the points. Max needs a point.
And Max couldn't have let Lando pass because Lando was too far behind him.
Well, he did pit for the fastest lap.
True, but even then he was only 4.5 seconds behind him.
You know, I'll say one thing about Lando Norris. He's very good about getting that fastest lap this season.
Yeah, maybe if he could just not get the fastest lap and not whiff his starts.
Yeah.
My driver who couldn't wait for it to be over was Lando because he makes him look like a chump.
Yeah. My driver of the day was Lewis. 10th to 2nd. I thought was a great drive, especially like getting around those cars. Lewis being a little bit of Lewis with some of the questions he was asking of Bono. And, he was chasing down George there for a little bit before he just blew out his tires trying to chase down George. But
yeah, he was fastest lap after fastest lap. He was doing a great job, but then he just chewed his tires. And for once, George didn't chew his tires and save them for the end, and I'm annoyed at him for that.
It would have been really interesting to see where this race would have ended up if Lewis had started either second or third.
Yes.
But yeah, so Lewis was my driver of the day. And I was going to say Lando wanted the day to be over because... oh man, you could just tell he was not, he just knew it was all gone at that point in time. But then I got caught up on Ferrari drama, so I'm going to say Charles is my driver who wanted everything to be over.
That's a good one. He seemed so annoyed at the end.
Yeah.
But there we are. Championship watch? Wrapped up like an early Christmas gift?
At least the drivers. The Constructors' Championship, Ferrari is 24 points behind McLaren with a good streak of form. They've been pulling points up back on them since Singapore. So yeah, it's gonna come right down to the wire. They need 12 points a race on McLaren.
That seems easy.
Yeah, but apparently they don't think they're gonna have a good car at Qatar. So we'll see.
Yeah. Do you see Haas but finally bumped in front of Alpine by 1 point, which is $10 million? Gene Haas will be happy about that.
I think, yeah, they were tied briefly during the race. That's going to be an interesting battle at the very bottom because you have Haas at 50, Alpine at 49, and RB at 46.
Where's Aston Martin?
86.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Surprising.
They had a good run near the top of the season. They've just been really crap since like Singapore or since the summer break. Yeah.
Both that are drivers. Spicy takes?
Let's see. What were my spicy takes? Well, it said, Perez not being forced to tank his performance to get aero time. Yeah.
I think that's going to be. I almost think that's kind of why they're not getting rid of him. They've realised if they're going to have to pay him $20 million to get him out the door, they might as well leverage his poor performance to make sure they get more aero time.
Fair. Zach Brown kind of had to eat his words with what he said about Max.
Zach Brown has lived up to every possible cliche that I expected when I started rewatching F1. He is loud, he's brash, and he's full of crap. And it just annoys me that he lives up to the cliche because he had such an opportunity to not live up to the cliche, and then he does.
Yeah. If we want to get a little bit into the spicy world, I think Fernando Alonso is washed, and that just makes Stroll look even worse than he actually is.
Explain why it makes Stroll look even worse than he is.
Okay, so we know that Sebastian Vettel is a very good race car driver, but then forgot how to drive a race car starting around 2021.
No, it's about 2019.
Okay. I'll give him a little bit of benefit of the doubt. Okay. Yeah. But essentially, as Sebastian got older, and as most drivers get older, they tend to lose some of their reflexes, skills, something or other. So as Sebastian got older, he lost it. Since 2021, really 23, Lewis has not looked great. Especially this season, Lewis has not looked great. Maybe he's just totally over and done with Mercedes, and his motivation just isn't there for this season because we can see it. So if we agree that Vettel and Lewis are very good modern F1 drivers, and even they fall off a cliff at some point in time, Fernando is older than both of them, and thus also must have fallen off a cliff. However, he is paired up with Lance Stroll, who's making Fernando look good. So, if Fernando is as washed as Vettel was, then Stroll is even worse than we can imagine because he's not losing to a good Fernando Alonso. He's losing to a washed up Fernando Alonso.
I get it now. It makes sense. For some reason, I thought you were saying because Fernando is so washed up. Stroll, I was like, but Stroll isn't like he's bad, but like he's not that far off Fernando. And I thought you were implying that even though Fernando, I got it now. It makes sense. I was having a slow moment. It's Sunday afternoon. I think I can kind of subscribe to this, and I feel like in the same way that you made the point that maybe Lewis is like, I think Fernando's reached that point in his life.
Fair enough.
I think that's what's going on. But please, can we get rid of Lance Stroll? Like, once we got rid of Perez, can we work on Stroll, please? Because, like, come on, people, let's do it. Predictions. Okay. While my co-host is working on his inspired, dynamic, thoughtful, well-considered predictions for Qatar to help us reach the NFL Hall of Fame, I will say that I think Merck's going to be terrible because they don't know why the car works. I think Ferrari's going to win in Qatar despite their protestations that the car is crap in Qatar, and it will be science. And then my spicy take is Max, who's given undertones of this throughout the season. Because he's got the championship, he's going to wrap it. He's just not going to bother showing up. And Colapinto will get the bump into his seat to try him out for the rest of the year.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, the only reason I would love to see Max not showing up or just like being the reserve driver now that he has it all wrapped up. Colapinto getting the bump would be hilarious away from the Williams, if only then to crash the Red Bull and cause even more cap space issues for Red Bull. That'd be hilarious. But Max just likes to race, so I see Max racing. I think the McLaren slide is going to continue. I don't think they'll be. I would go so far as to say they won't even get on the podium. I'm not entirely sure McLaren or Mercedes is going to be terrible. I think it could be interesting. I'm almost tempted to go back and look at like the Bahrain results, because as we all know, Qatar is just Bahrain if you forgot how to draw the circuit, if you're drawing it from memory.
And they supposedly have done magic upgrades, but the problem is in predicting this is the car. Nobody knows why the car doesn't work, or does work for that matter. And so that's the difficulty. Is if you think the car's made a step forward in performance, you can draw that. But I don't think it's made a step forward in performance. I think it's a random number generator.
I'll add a bold prediction in here of we will hear more about Red Bull buying out Sergio's contract before Qatar.
Oh yeah, that seems likely. Please God, let that happen. I need him not to be on the grid next year. I need him and Stroll not to be on the grid next year. Like, there is so much. It really is not about so much that they're bad and I need them gone because they suck. That's clearly part of it. It's the fact that there's so much young talent that needs the opportunity, and let's have it. Like, if we've already got like 4 rookies on the field next year, let's just go all the way. Let's make half the grid.
Well, they're gonna 2026. We have the rookie sprint race. That'll be fun.
Yeah, but I want them to have an actual seat. I want them to like have the opportunity to develop and learn and marshal their skills. Because
if you've made it to this far in the podcast, God bless you. I can't believe you've made it this far, because I didn't know we could even talk this much about nothing that happened. Very interesting. That was a sentence that was weird. Anyway, I don't know what Dominic's going to leave in this episode or not, because I don't listen to him. But thank you for listening. As always, we're waiting for your feedback. So write in at feedback@tinfoilhelmets.com and let us know your conspiracies, feedbacks, wants, random musings about Formula One, and tell your friends to like, rate, listen, and subscribe. We'll be back next week with a wrap-up of the Qatar Grand Prix. Is it actually called the Qatar Grand Prix? What's it called?
Oh, it's probably called the La Soil Qatari Expedition, sponsored by Emirates and Heineken 0.0, with a free cruise and a Kit Kat. Grand Prix.
Officially known as the Formula One Qatari Airways Qatar Grand Prix 2024.
Ah, that could be worse. At least it's not the Emilia Romagna Heineken pizza, whatever it is.
Made in Italy.
There we go.
That's the one that always gets. Some cruises made in Italy, yeah.
It's very strange.
Well, even then, this was the Heineken Silver Las Vegas Grand Prix.
What's Heineken Silver?
I think it's their zero alcohol one.
I thought that was just Heineken. Heineken 0.0. Sorry, that was lest the Heineken marketing department's upset at me. That's not what I meant. I meant like the Heineken 0.0 is called Heineken 0.0.
Heineken Silver is the light lager made by Heineken.
The light lager for people who can't stomach an even lighter beer anyway.
At only 2.9 carbs and 95 calories, Heineken Silver is a world-class light beer with all the taste and no bitter endings, brewed at 4% ABV. See, we're so ready for ad reads. Oh, we're so ready for ad reads.
Would you like to sponsor us? Would you like your ad read? Please contact us at feedback@tinfoilhelmets.com.
What's the rambling they always do at the end of liquor commercials, that it's like Heineken Beverage Company, LLC, United States, please drink responsibly, something like that?
Exactly.
Yeah.